Hello, and welcome to a, I guess, special edition of the DoneJS contributors meeting. My name is Chasen Lahara. It is Friday, April 20th, 2018. And what we're going to be doing today is going over the proposals that are going to be on our next survey. First, do you guys want to say hello, introduce yourselves real quick?
Hello, I'm Justin.
Hello. Matthew, sorry.
Hello, Kevin.
Cool. So I want to start off by sharing my screen and talking a little bit about what's happened over our last 6 weeks since we sent out our last survey. So since the last survey, we've shipped two things. Improve error messages and handling was something that we were actually almost done by the last survey, but Matthew wrapped that up. If you're on the latest versions of all of the Steel and DoneJS packages, the error messages and how things are handled and presented to you should be a million times better. And also, since then, Matthew has shipped making CanJS tree shakeable. So there's actually docs on canjs.com now. If you go to guides and then experimental ES module usage, you can see how to use the can/ES module, and you can import stuff like this. So those are two things that we've shipped. We're currently in progress on 4. Kevin has been working on the dev tools for CanJS. It sounds like we're actually going to have that shipped like very soon.
Yeah, hopefully today.
Awesome.
Very soon.
That's awesome. Justin's been working on can query logic, and I think that's gonna not as soon, but that's getting ready to ship as well. Minimize bundle size and tree shaking, Matthew's been working on, and I've been working on improved routing to components. We still plan on tackling the routing guide and the testing guide. These two are kind of waiting for me to be done with improved routing. So that's still on our plate. So today what we're going to do is we're going to go through the new proposals that we're adding to this survey that's going to go out in just a couple hours. And then we'll go back through some of the proposals, or we'll go back through all of the proposals that have been on previous surveys and are also going to be on this one. And there's a couple that have been updated with more information, more ideas. So we'll go back through those. Justin, do you want to get us started on easy state management for React with CanObserve?
I would love to, Chasen.
All right, let me present you. All right, should be good to go.
I presented?
Yes.
All right. Please excuse the clutter of my desktop. Lately, for some reason, Skitch, I don't know if anybody else had this bug, but Skitch doesn't like dragging and dropping into GitHub, so I have to save it to my desktop and then drag it from my desktop. I've gotten a lot less done in the last couple of weeks just because of that. I've been too lazy to reinstall it. All right, so this is a proposal for a, I would say this is kind of like an enhancement to React View models if people are familiar with that. But the idea is to bring it into its own project with its own website. What this is it is a project that provides easy state management for React by using CanJS's observables, specifically the new CanObserve object and CanObserve array, the things that are made with proxies. So this proposal actually writes up a little bit of what a homepage would look like for that project. I always think it's good to do kind of documentation or promotion-driven development as much as you can. So if you like that, read through this, and if you like this idea fully, please vote for this. The idea here is, by the way, PostAct is not at all the final name for this project. This was just something I picked because I needed a name. But the idea, I'm going to call it PostAct going forward, but if people have better names for it, please suggest them. PostAct, the problem it solves for React is that React can be a little confusing to new users, and because it doesn't really allow you to just change data and have that data automatically just be updated in the page. That's something that CanJS can do and other things that use observables, but React you also have to call set state. Now, this is simple enough when you have a basic project, but it can be more complex when you have a much bigger project where you have to make sure state is set appropriately through a large sequence of React components. With PostAct, the state object that is documented as part of React, this would actually become a observable. And then if you wanted to change the state of your application, you can just change the properties on state or any properties within state, and any components that read those properties will automatically be updated. You don't need to call set state on those individual components. So it's really just a difference. If you're familiar with React, you instead extend this PostAct component, and then you can just set properties directly or set things within state to your heart's content. So the big benefits, it's just something that I think all developers, this is why people are using Vue. It's something that all developers can understand, is this basic object-oriented programming, which creates less boilerplate. It also can improve update time performance because you only have to re-render the templates that specifically are reading the property that is mutated. And because it's integrated with CanJS, there's a lot of other benefits, like it will plan to eventually make it work with the new CanDebug stuff. You can create extended view model types, and there's the React View Models way of creating higher order independently tested views and view models, which I'll show real quick. And then it will be possible to use this with the new Can Connect as well. So the only other example that I really want to give for right now is what it looks like to create an extended view model and then a higher order component. So if you wanted to, you can create, just like in CanJS, you can create your own independent view models that are unit testable. Here I can create a paginate state for a pagination widget with getters and setters and methods and all of those kind of things. And then in my app, I would just initialize state to a new instance of paginate state. And then I can pass that state object around wherever I want to pass it. And then sub-components, if they wanted to call the next method, for instance, they can just call next, and it will change the offset. And then all of the other widgets that are reading from the offset will update themselves automatically. The other thing it can do is you can create higher order components with this connect method that will be on PostAct. It will be PostAct connect. Essentially, you can create your view model and your view independently and then assemble them together here. And there's even other fancy stuff that I'm not going to get into right now, but read through this and vote for this if you like using React, but also want to be able to use CanJS observables and data layer.
That was right at 5 minutes. That was perfect.
Nice.
I'm going to go next and present two. They are not big like API things, so they'll be easy to go through. First one, improve the content of the CanJS documentation. So the TLDR here is that kind of over the years, we've had lots of changes in the CanJS side, but we've never done like a thorough review of at least the most popular content. So kind of in various places, there's broken links. There might be demos that we don't even know about that are broken, or code examples that we can improve that haven't been updated with the latest API changes. So this proposal is for us to go through at least the most popular pages. Hopefully we'd be able to do something automated for things like broken links and find things that we need to fix. Additionally, we already know about some things of documentation cleanup that we need to do, like the constlet and sample code. We've done that in our guides, but that hasn't been applied to any of the other packages. Same thing with the ES6 import syntax. Out of Other things we know are the descriptions for our core packages could be improved, and there's some other documentation things. There's even more if we look at the documentation label that we've been adding to various issues. So there's issues been filed about broken things and things that need to be updated that we still need to address. So if you're using CanJS documentation, everyone is, but if you're using CanJS documentation and you'd like to see it cleaned up and reviewed, vote for this proposal. Second one is improve.
Jason,
yeah.
Sorry, before you start, did you want to share your screen? Because you're not sharing your screen.
Oh, man. So I'm presenting to everyone and I didn't share my screen. Thank you. Well, so that was basically a description of stuff that's in this issue. There wasn't anything that I super needed to point out. For the second one, improve CanJS.com's usability. So I've conducted a couple of usability studies with a bunch of different participants. And from that, we've identified ways that we can improve CanJS's or CanJS.com's ease of use. And we filed a number of issues related to this, but we haven't been able to address them. Our priorities have been what's been voted on in the proposals. So this includes a range of things from improving the homepage and stuff in our tech overview pages. We have a secret comparison to other frameworks page that is hidden that would be good to clean up. There's a bunch of small bugs in our sites, like when you navigate back or how signatures are displayed. A bunch of small usability issues that we think will not only improve stuff for new users, but existing users too, because we run into things like back button not always working, or the outlines for signatures not being as good as they could. So as part of this as well, we've identified a bunch of SEO issues, and I consider this part of CanJS.com's usability because a frequent way that people end up on the content on CanJS.com is through search. So it really matters that our SEO is good and people can find what they're looking for through Google or what have you to be able to use our site. So there's some issues that we should address for SEO that would affect CanJS.com's usability as well. So vote for this if you'd like to see us address some usability and ease of use issues and bugs with CanJS.com. Any questions or comments? Nope. Cool. Evan, would you like to go next with make it possible to support IE11?
Sure. All right. So with CanJS 4.0, we stopped officially supporting IE11, and there's a few different things that we're using that aren't supported in IE11. Kind of see a list of them here. Some of them we need, some of them we don't actually need to use. But the idea behind this proposal is that we should make it possible for people to make their apps support IE11. So this kind of walks through how we would do that. The first thing is we would stop using things that aren't supported that we don't need to use. Things like object.assign, we could use our own packages that we already have, can assign or can reflect assign map. Calling a set with an iterable isn't supported in IE11. We could stop doing that by doing something like this. The next step would be to document what polyfills you actually need. I think that the biggest one there would be weak set, and we should document that and give people some examples of polyfills that are available in order to make those things work so that CanJS will work in IE11. And then the next phase is to make it possible to use CanJS in IE11 without globally polyfilling. So polyfills, like if you polyfill weak set, that's going to change weak set for everyone. If you're writing a script that's like loaded as a third party, or you don't want to change the browser, you've got some other stuff running that could possibly break. We want to make it possible for you to polyfill weak set without having to change the global weak set. And this kind of walks through how we would do that. Basics of it are that everywhere in CanJS where we are using weak set, we would instead use our own package. We would import this package and use that instead. And then we would also provide a package that has the polyfills, and we would give documentation on how to replace these if you want to. So like in Steel, you could replace the actual weak set with the polyfill version. And then the last step of this is just we would test. We would test in IE11 to make sure that things are actually working in IE11. There's a bunch of different issues around this. A lot of people have brought this up, but this is the idea behind making it possible to support IE11.
Thanks, Kevin.
Sure.
Justin, would you like to present support object literals, shorthand assignment spread, and restish operators?
Yeah, so this one should be pretty quick. We'll allow object literals inside stash. So here I could call a function with an object that will read val A and val B and assign them to prop A and prop B. I can also assign my state view model property to an object as well. Shorthand assignment would work, and the spread operator would work. This is essentially saying read the value of prop A and create an object with a prop A property that points to the value of the prop A key value. The spread operator here is going to take essentially take Z and copy all of its values into this object. That would work like this as well. And then by restish, this isn't exactly rest syntax, but it basically supports the same thing. This is saying I want my state property to be an object that comes from all of these things. Oh wait, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong one. I was like, wait, I'm explaining something that I don't actually get. Sorry. This is kind of restish. This allows me to say I want to assign prop A and prop B on my component view model. So this will assign the view model's prop A to the prop A value in the scope, and its prop B property to the prop B value in the scope. If something was an object, so like value property was an object or a map, it's going to copy all of the values on this to the view model here. So vote for this if you think this would be helpful, or vote for it if you don't think it'll be helpful. Try something new.
I like this one. Just very quick question. The passing an object literal, that replaces hash expressions, right?
We still support hash expressions for backwards compatibility, but yes, it
would do the same thing. Yeah.
Do pretty much the exact same thing.
Cool. Thanks, Justin. Kevin, do you want to present on supporting JSX template syntax?
Sure. Yeah. So this is something that I've presented a few times now. I want to take a little bit of a different stab at it. So this is the README for CanJSX, and I've updated it with kind of a larger example that shows all of the benefits of CanJS plus JSX. So the idea behind this is that we're going to take things that are popular in a bunch of different frameworks and combine them together into what is CanJS plus JSX. So what you would get out of this is native custom elements. So Can component right now creates custom elements that you can just use directly in the page. That's awesome. JavaScript templating, that's basically the biggest feature of JSX, is that it's just JavaScript. So you can kind of see in this example, we can create a function here called toClass name, and then we can use it because this is using JavaScript scope lookup to find that. And you can use your normal dev tools and things like that to debug your templates. Intuitive event and data bindings. This is basically stash bindings, but inside of JSX. So we've got let me find some of these things like value2 and on click handlers. The way that you have them in can stash, we'd support that inside of JSX. Object-oriented view models. So this is one of the benefits of.
Sorry, in addition to JSX, right?
Right. Yes.
So yeah, a normal JSX template would still work.
Correct. Cool. So object-oriented view models. So in CanJS, you can create your view models as object-oriented as you'd like. So things like creating functions and then just having the ability to call them on your object, things like that. Things that, like Justin mentioned earlier, almost all developers would understand. And then the last thing is just CanJS is observable. So it means that your views, your JSX, the view that's created by JSX would update automatically when your observable view model changes. So that's the idea behind CanJSX. Go through this larger example if you're interested, and definitely vote for this if you want all of these awesome things together.
Cool.
Thanks, Kevin. Justin, you're next.
Yes, I am. All right, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay.
We see the terminal window.
Great. So I want you to, everybody should close their eyes right now and imagine a world where you don't have to program anymore because you basically can scaffold out. You basically a few quick commands and you can have a working application. Now, open your eyes. I'm going to show you how that can happen. So the idea here is that I can create a normal CanJS application. And what I'm going to do is if I have a data layer, I'm going to be able to quickly scaffold up a working application. And if you're not familiar with scaffolding, don't worry about it. It'll make sense as I go on. So here I just generated a default CanJS application called scaffolded. This would say your normal hello world. And let's say I have some services built for, this is kind of a Bitballs-like example. I have a services for players that returns players data, a services for tournaments that returns tournaments data, and a service layer for teams that returns team data. Now these, I can hit these URLs from my server and it returns back this data. Now what I want to do is make an application as quick as possible where I can edit this data. What we would add is the ability to, like when you would generate supermodel, you can generate other models, not necessarily, they don't have to be super at this point, just a REST model, but you can give it the URL and it will infer the properties and build your actual properties out when it defines your model layer. So here I'm saying, hey, I want to add a REST model from API players. And what this would do is generate a player model that is going to be a defined map. And because we know that it has an ID and a name and a birthday and a height and a weight, and we can infer the types of those values that we're getting back, our model would be written out for us. And then we would have a REST function. This is the new CanConnect utility functions. This is something like supermap. You basically pass your map and your URL and it configures, it changes players. So that's where the get list, save, delete methods, it adds those methods to the player object so it can hit that API. Okay, so with this, just with defining the model like this, we can pretty much quickly build like a fully working form and grid that allows us to view all the players and edit them and create new ones. I'll show you what that would look like. So here's the default produced DoneJS application. I could npm install something called what I'm calling CanCrud, and then I would import that. So all I've done here is I'm importing my player model, and I'm importing CanCrud. I'm exporting my player model to the scope variables, and I'm passing that player type to CanCrud as its type. And then with just that, those I basically ran a generator, and now I added these 3 lines, 2 of them imports, 1 of them actually using CanCrud. What that produces is a page like this, right? So it loads all the players, shows you their data. There's a link so you can see more details. It'll expand to show more details. I'll show that in a second. You can delete one, you can edit one, and you can create a player. And because we know the types of these things, because we know name is a string, we can create the appropriate input element. So I could create players, and they would show up automatically in the list. I can hit the edit button, which is basically what I did there, and I could edit and change that player's information. So that's great. I was about to kind of be like, but there's more, but still that's awesome. But the cool thing about this idea of CAN-CRUD, the way I'm envisioning it, is that you can use, it's built of different pieces called CAN-CREATE, CAN-LIST, CAN-EDIT, I forgot the last one, CAN-DISPLAY or something like that, where you can use the parts that CAN-CRUD are built up. So let's say I created let's say I created my player grid, but I still need to be able to create new players. Well, then what I can do is I can import that player grid, use player grid instead of the whole CAN-CRUD, but still use the part of CAN-CRUD that was just used to create the player. So here I am using my fancy player grid, but I can make one small component that just creates players. So I use CAN-CREATE. I could do the reverse. If I had made a fancy creation widget, I could keep my grid, my CAN-LIST or CAN-GRID in the page. I could kind of, as I'm building my app, I can use the pieces that I still want to leave in place of CAN-CRUD. I can leave them in place. But anyways, if I did this nice player grid, now I've got a fancier grid because it's colored slightly different. Now I can see what CAN-GRID looks like, but I can still create players without having to build anything. Now,
we're at about 5 minutes, just FYI, Justin.
Yeah, this one's worth it because I'm presenting it better. So now I'm going to add a real-time model, and I'm going to add teams. So this documents teams. I can make a change to say the players and the tournament IDs are actually referencing players and tournaments, right? So this is how you can add relationships within a defined map. So CAN-JS understands that there's a relationship there. And if you do this, and then I added to, I forgot to show the changing the code. I was supposed to CAN-CRUD team here. If I CAN-CRUDed team, not player, it would show drop-downs allowing me to actually pick the associated player that should set the player ID property because it knows the relationship. And the final thing is just, this is can be maybe nice for view models. So if I created a player page component that was supposed to show the detailed information for a player, and here's what the demo page looks like by default. It just adds pages player. Well, what I could do is essentially export the view model and then pass that view model to CAN-EDIT. That's the part of CAN-CRUD that allows you to edit a particular data piece. And since this player page has been passed to CAN-EDIT, maybe the player page only takes a player ID as the value you can change. Well, it'll show the player profile on top, but then CAN-EDIT will just make a little widget that allows you to adjust all of the different properties on that view model. This is probably something that should already be built into the CAN-debug stuff that Kevin is working on, because it's probably very similar, but here you could use it direct to make your demo pages, so you could adjust any of the values that are passed to the component. So that's it. Vote for this one if you want to make it easier to bootstrap an application.
Cool. Thank you, Justin. And I think that last point was cool, too, that some of the work for this can be reused in the debugger to provide similar functionality, or vice versa. Matthew, do you want to talk through the SSR tips and tricks proposal?
Yeah. Well, first off, I really like that one. Justin, you should work on your jump shot. 1% is your shooting percentage.
I wonder if people would notice that.
You probably have really good defense, though, right? Make up for it. All right. So SSR is, I don't know, it's one of the coolest features of DoneJS. I think anyone that uses DoneJS should be using our SSR because I think it's probably the best out there. But it uses some parts of it can be tricky to debug, particularly stuff around zones. So it's kind of over time, we've kind of built up a lot of, we built up some features. I don't know if you remember recently, a few months back, Done Auto Render added the ability to like break on like a zone timeout. So and we have debugging in Done SSR as well. You can set a debug flag, and it will give you like a list of possible things that have possible things that could be preventing the zone from completing, for example. So we have all these little features, and we don't really have a consolidated place to explain how to use them, nor do we have a place just to kind of like, hey, I've run into this particular problem. What can I do about it? I see a lot of similarities between this project with the recent error messaging and handling that we worked on. Is a lot of it is consolidating, like where are the problems that people are facing when they have problems with SSR, and documenting those in like a good place. Maybe even adding error messaging around this. This might lead into that kind of thing. But really, we're talking about a guide is the main outcome of this proposal. Is having a guide that says, you know, for example, you can, I don't know if people know this, but you can specify a status code for the request. So kind of within your application view model, you can see if, you know, perhaps it's an invalid URL. Maybe it's like player ID of 12, but there is no player 12. You want to set that to a 404. You actually have the capabilities to do that. But like I said, it's not well known. So if you're interested in a guide for SSR, tips and tricks guide, you're a user of Done SSR, which I hope you are, please vote for this one.
Cool. Thank you, Matthew. Justin, do you want to present on the data guide proposal and the stash event modifiers proposal?
Yes. Hold on, I just lost my link to them. Oh no, there it is. Data guide. If you want to learn how to data good and do other things good too, I would vote for this one. I am partway through, mostly through creating a new version of can query or of can set called can query logic, and a new version of can connect that uses it. Although can connect will mostly, I mean, it should be pretty much entirely backwards compatible, except you should use can query logic instead of can set algebra. But this whole guide is just to give a bunch of, the idea here is just make a guide that gives a bunch of use cases and how you do set up and overcome various different problems with your data layer. So if you struggle with CanJS's data layer, vote for this one. And what was the next one I needed to do?
The stash event modifiers.
So Vue has a whole big list of event modifiers that allow you to kind of call prevent default automatically, call stop propagation automatically, listen to escape and tab, and we have like our own enter event, but that's the only one we have. A whole bunch of useful things. I personally dislike having to always pass the event object and call stop propagation on it. It would shorten up a lot of code. Vote for this if you feel similarly and would like some way to make it easier to call, listen to either certain events or call stop propagation or prevent default.
Cool, thank you. I'm going to go next. Let me share my screen this time. All right, make CanJS compatible with how Webpack strips out dev code. This one is fairly straightforward. This is an internal to CanJS thing. So right now we're relying on Steele's remove development code build option. And this is how we comment out code that should be removed in a production build with steal remove start and steal remove end. This is not compatible with how Webpack or Browserify or other bundlers strip out code that shouldn't be in a production build. The most common pattern is to use this, which is also supported by Steal. We could include this as part of our build and make that work. The problem is if we just did that, then we'd not have the code removed in production for existing Steal users. So if we tried to do this in CanJS 4, we'd probably have to do a combo of including both. Or if we did this as part of CanJS 5, then we could just jump to checking for process env, node env. So this proposal is for us to go ahead and do that and make how CanJS removes debug code compatible with Browserify and Webpack and other bundlers. So if you use a different bundler, I would definitely vote for this one. Even if you are a Steal.js user, it'd be good for us to be more compatible with how other bundlers work. So vote for this one if you're interested in it. Matthew, would you like to go next with Steal.js 2.0?
I would. I actually just closed the tab. I don't know why I just did that.
Perfect timing.
Well, it's because I realized that I needed to add to this list make Amplify on by default because currently, we are able to do that, but it's an option when you run the build currently. I don't know if we could change it to be true by default or not. I'd have to test that out. Without being a breaking change, it is. So yeah, Steal 2.0, Steal 1.0 came out, I think a little over a year ago. At this point, most people are using browsers with promises, native promise support. So we have the Steal sans promises build, very, very wordy. But it'd be much better if Steal.js was the default. I think this alone is a great reason to pick Steal 2.0. It's so much easier to do debug when you don't have all of the polyfill layers in your stack trace. That's the main thing. Then otherwise, it'd be removing some deprecated things like the Bower plugin, which I don't think anyone uses anymore. Support for npm2. And then we probably make it so that a main attribute in the Steal script tag is required, at least in development mode. It makes it a lot easier to understand that you always have to use a main wherever you're using Steal. And lastly, we might clean up the logging output. I'm not sure what that will turn into, but just look at some of the other bundler tools and see what their logging looks like, and maybe have more different log levels and that kind of thing. Whereas now we have like a pretty verbose output, and then we have an even more verbose output than that if you want it. So, but yeah, this is Steal 2.0.
Great, thank you. Kevin, do you want to take us home with the last proposal?
Sure. All right, so this proposal is to add docs about customizing the generator templates in DoneJS. So DoneJS has this idea of templates. So for example, if you run DoneJS add component, it's going to use these files to generate your component. These are like EJS templates that the properties get replaced, and this becomes what you see in your app. So if you want to make changes to this, say for example, you want to use double quotes instead of single quotes, or you want to do anything really, it is possible to do that, to customize these, but it's right now it's pretty difficult. You have to manually copy all of these files from this folder into a secret .donejs/templates folder that you have to create in your project, and then you have to edit it from there. And there's also no documentation on how to do that. So basically, this proposal is to fix this. First, make it so that this templates folder gets created for you, and these things get put in there for you somehow, either through like a DoneJS customize command, or just when you run DoneJS add component or something like that. And then also provide documentation on how to make changes to these, and also that it is possible. So yeah, that's this. If you want to be able to customize your templates, the things that get created through DoneJS commands, vote for this.
Great, thanks, Kevin. Those are all of the proposals that'll be on the survey that goes out in maybe an hour or two. Anything you guys wanted to talk about before we close out?
I guess we could have a quick discussion on the difference between CanJSX and PostAct and our feelings about those.
Sure.
I would say that PostAct is like, and also maybe a reflection upon how we make decisions anyways, because not necessarily everything that's voted number one we do, because, you know, how long it's going to take to do something also weighs in on our decision. I would say that PostAct, my feelings on this is that PostAct is easier to accomplish because it's like almost already there. CanJSX, if that is its real name or whatever, it's really like a CanJS 5 or 6.0. It's really what that represents. And I think that that's more ambitious. It does more, you know, one of my biggest frustrations with React in general is that it doesn't create custom elements because I'm a big believer in their potential. So that's just a really nice feature. But at the same time, PostAct can be done. And then we're kind of reaching out to the React community, which is huge. And we can make our tools and things like that just get more, you know, the more people are using something like Can Observe, the better everything becomes for us. So to me, it's more of like more practicality in some ways versus like big pictures, right? It depends on what you want to see happen. The other advantage I would just say of CanJSX is that it's probably more integratable with the rest of CanJS. My assumption would be, but that might not be a big feature because it's like you have to upgrade to like CanJS 5 or 6 before you can even use it.
By integratable, you mean like the existing code or like other packages are going to be able to be used more easily with like a CanJSX versus PostAct in a project or what have you.
Yes. Now, it doesn't mean we can't make tools around PostAct for being able to go back and forth between like CanJS components and you want to mount a PostAct component or just a React component, really. But my guess is because it's going to be creating custom elements, and custom elements are kind of auto mountable anyways, no matter what scenario you're in. They just integrate easier with everything. I mean, that's why custom elements are, you know, such a nice thing for longevity in terms of your code base.
Yeah, a couple of comments. So one, I think another difference that people should think about is like with CanJSX, we don't have to include React. The only thing that we have to include is like React's JSX Babel transform, and that wouldn't actually get included in your production build. Whereas with PostAct, you'd have lots of parts of CanJS, and you'd also have all of React, right? Which might make it hard for you to, might make you not want to run them both side by side. You might not want to have a PostAct component alongside your existing CanJS components. Whereas with JSX, you could have your existing components using Stash and then add a new component with JSX, and it wouldn't add a ton to your project.
To be clear about what PostAct doesn't, it's not going to be that big because PostAct just on its own only loads Can Observe, which depends on Can Reflect and maybe like one or other two smaller libraries. So that's not that big. Can't PostAct. You don't add very much on top of React to just use PostAct.
Will PostAct work with like Preact or?
Yes. Yes, that is the plan.
If it is so
PostAct is project.
Then it wouldn't be bad to integrate into a CanJS project. So that's like 4K or something.
Yeah, that's true.
As far as like weight added, you're not adding that much weight if you use Preact, if you're like doing consistent CanJS project.
The other thing I wanted to say is, Justin, what makes you say it would be a CanJS 5 or 6? What do you see breaking through doing CanJS X?
I don't know. I mean, we generally, like, I would say that I think that once we say that there's like a way, this is like the new core, if can proxy or can observe stuff moved into core, well, then we're breaking, there's no IE support at all then. So I just think that that's, you know, we might not have to break anything to get people to use it, but my guess is we will. Which just kind of always happens. Like we'll create the new can observe or can observation that goes with it that does this new thing, and then it's like, oh, everything's got to update to the new can observation. I just feel like that's kind of a common. Big new features tend to bring a few breaking changes along with them. It's in some ways our way to get people to upgrade to like the breaking features that we really want, which is like not a terrible infrastructure for like how can observation work before with CID and all of that stuff. So, oh, we've got to use set now. We're going to use set or weak sets or whatever. Let's get people to upgrade. So we'll make some fun new features along with like the infrastructure changes that support it. Oh, and can queues. That's a perfect example of like, I don't know if people upgrade for that, but it makes our lives a lot easier. And I think we'll make people's lives easier in the long run. They just aren't aware of it.
And then the other thing I was wondering, with post-act, can you only use can observe, or could you make your state object a define map?
You could make it a define map. The default one is intended to be the proxy one. So yeah, I guess that's one point is like this will only work and post-act will not work unless you hold in define map, which you'd have to go through hoops to do that. It will not work in IE. But I guess neither would CanJSX, presumably, if that was using a proxy-based event or element type behavior for observables. But the plan is to use the new proxy-based observables.
Okay, cool. Should we bike shed about names?
I don't think we should. There's so much of that going on, and there's a whole document. I don't think we should. We should, but not here. It just bore people.
Yeah. Cool. Anything else before we go? All right. The survey will be posted soon. Thanks for watching. Talk to you guys later.
Thanks, Jason.